this semester. I'm just interested in how it is. What are the mechanisms whereby that wonderful $1 billion worth of food, the land that produces that within Sydney, how is that protected from urban infill? Because in this country, nothing stands between that kind of land and urban infill, except bloody-mindedness on the part of an owner.
It's absolutely under threat, and there are several public health, environment, consumer alliances that are fighting hard. But I think 16 years ago, a nutrition epidemiologist, Karen Webb, formerly of the University of Sydney, and a couple of others, latched on to the food insecurity in terms of nutrient issue. And she went to the outer rim of that Sydney basin, and for 16 years there have been coalitions who have quite assiduously built links between public health, environmental health, heritage values, and that land. And they're having to keep changing tack, but to this point they've been successful. But it is absolutely under threat, that 1% of land. It is enormously profitable if it was to be developed on. But somehow that coalition, you have professors of medicine, you have the great environmentalists, you have a lot of people now through the farm trails and the small farm gate sales, a lot of livelihoods rest in that too, and so you can point to the employment disbenefits of building on that land. But it's 16 years or more of civil society engagement and action, and now getting quite sophisticated about the evidence where possible. So the study that we will be doing with CSIRO is that we're going to try and actually take going to take poultry and look at the environmental costs and benefits of a high industrial poultry production, small to medium and civic, the backyard job, and try and gather the evidence to say which is the more environmentally sustainable and who's eating from which of the poultry chains, the high industry chain. So, I think we're all trying to be creative about how, and now the evidence might show that the 30,000 a day kill in the Ingham's poultry factory is far better than thousands of people growing 2 or 3 chooks down. But so we run that risk, but I think it's creative methodologies and civil society action.
Jane, thank you for the talk. Tony Blakely, Research Professor here at the University of Otago, Wellington. My question's about the equity issue you raised. What about the cost of producing your own food compared to the cost of having it done in a mass scale for, I'm thinking of families who say below average income, and whether or not it's actually a more cost-effective way for them to do it? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question I made particularly interesting as well for Broome is the time poverty aspect. If you're giving up your time for employment and you having to already do 2 shifts to maintain the family income to go to school and all the rest of it, do you have any comments about that aspect and sort of a little bit more beyond just saying it will reduce inequalities?
Tony, I think, well, definitely have no simple answer. I have no one single body of evidence to point to, and I have to preface what I say, particularly now that you've introduced time, as these things are context specific. So I will just explain a little bit about the time issue Tony's raised. That, yes, it hasn't been a capitalist plot that we've all turned to the market to be fed. We have made rational decisions to date that there is an opportunity cost, particularly for women, staying at home and producing the food from scratch and doing the fruit bottling of the excess, etc., to tide you over. That means income foregone. So households have made and women have made, and there haven't been just economic decisions, but social status decisions, fulfilment decisions, that they would rather forego food provisioning activities, hand that over to the market. And yes, I mean, in terms of longevity, we don't see that populations have health has declined as a result of women going into the workforce, quite in reverse. But I do think we are making choices, and it's not just about time, not just about work, family, life choices, but we are making choices about what to do in those out of work hours. And what we're increasingly seeing is that leisure time, that, well, I think it's wrong to call it leisure time, but that time over which you have a little bit more control because you're not in the workplace, you're not doing the 2 shifts. Either because we're so exhausted, so overwhelmed, we are spending more and more hours watching television, we're spending more and more hours with screen-based activities, we are spectators at sport, we're not engaged, we might rush into the gym on the way home and then we're too exhausted to cook. So I do actually think in that time outside, that committed time, that time for survive, we work to survive in many instances. There are other things that can be done with that time, food provisioning being one of them. As for the equity, and then this applies to poor and rich alike, as to the equity argument, the evidence that poor people can afford to do the backyard gardening, they can afford the seeds, the inputs, they can afford when things fail.
And afford the land.
Yeah, well, no, I think this is where local governments have a role in providing community allotments. Certainly in Victoria, the state government has turned over land in all of the big housing developments to community allotments, and that's where they're being most successful. So in fact, they're either peppercorn rent or they're rent-free. So the land isn't an issue, the inputs is an issue, and the failure is an issue. Like if actually the spinach and potatoes all get too much mildew and they're eaten by bugs, and you've invested in that, and then you have to turn to the market. But you know, there are gardening specialists and agricultural. In the old days they used, well, you don't need extension officers, but something, there has to be capacity and infrastructure to support civic agriculture, without a doubt.